Hello everyone. Today we have another mythology video. Surprise, surprise. And of course I am bringing back the big old book, but today I am very excited because we are going to read one of my favorites. So today we are going to go into Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology. I have a very big curiosity on gathering some more details about these mythologies. So without further ado, I'll just start right away. So, big golden book, of course. I feel like that's one of the best purchases I've made lately. But anywho, so here we have it. From the great heaven, the goddess set her mind on the great below, the descent of Inanna. And there she is. So, let us start. Mesopotamian civilization was essentially urban, with people living in walled cities, yet it had an agrarian focus too. Citizens had plots of land either within a city or outside its walls. If they had livestock, people would take the animals out to the graze, but return them to the city at night, often keeping them in their own houses. In such a society, the fertility of humans, animals, and the land had great cultural significance. The people had shrines to fertility gods in their homes, sometimes decorated with figurines. Many myths, including the descent of Inanna, featured the cycles of the seasons and fertility. Revenge and death. Inanna was a great Mesopotamian deity, representing the realities around which life then revolved. Fertility, procreation, sensuality, love, but also war. The goddess is mentioned in the earliest texts from the 4th millennium BCE, when she was the patroness of the important city of Uruk in Sumer, southern Iraq. Inanna was the subject of several ancient myths and a poem called The Descent of Inanna. The poem relates how she, the Queen of Heaven, determined to visit her widower sister Ereshkigal, Queen of the Underworld. Inanna hoped to attend the funeral rites of her sister's husband, knowing that her actions had led to his death. For Inanna had offered her hand in marriage to the heroic demigod Gilgamesh, only to be met with rejection and mockery. She had asked her father Anu, the sky god, to send the bull of heavens, the deity Gugalana, Ereshkigal's husband, to seek revenge on Gilgamesh. Visible in the night sky as the constellation the Romans called Taurus, The bull had the power to consume crops, dry up rivers, and cause the earth to shake. Anu agreed and sent the bull, but Gilgamesh, who possessed superhuman strength, killed and dismembered it. Because she felt responsible for his death, Inanna wanted to mourn with her sister in the underworld. However, in some interpretations of the story, Inanna intended to conquer her sister's realm so that she could extend her power into the underworld. An unwelcome guest. For the Mesopotamians, the underworld was not unlike the real world, except that it was always dark, people were naked, and the bread and beer were stale. Not bad. Named Kur, this realm was neither good nor bad, but existed between heavens and earth, where the dead remained trapped between the two planes of existence. Inanna knew that her descent into the underworld could also lead to her death. As protection, she equipped herself with 7 divine powers, symbolized in items that she wore and held. Inanna put on a turban, described as headgear for the open country, and hung lapis lazuli beads around her neck. She wore twin egg-shaped beads on her breasts, donned a fine pala dress, placed a pectoral over her chest named Come Man Come, and adorned her hand with a golden ring. As the Queen of Heaven, she also clasped her lapis lazuli rod and tape used for measuring the boundaries of her realm. Inanna's fine robes, attractive ornaments, and the mascara called Let a Man Come, Let Him Come, that she wore to make her irresistible, represented sexuality, beauty, and fertility. The rod and tape were instruments of her authority, acquired from Enlil, the chief Mesopotamian deity, who had set down the decrees that established the foundations of civilized society. Before leaving heaven, Inanna told her attendant Ninshubur to seek the god's help if she did not return. When Inanna reached the entrance to the underworld, the gatekeeper ran to tell Ereshkigal that and was told to immediately lock the 7 gates against the new arrival. To gain entry through each gate, Inanna had to relinquish her divine powers. Item by item, she was compelled to remove her turban and ornaments and to give up the rod and measuring tape. Finally, at the last gate, she also had to take off her clothes so that she was naked like everybody else. In the Akkadian version of the story, something else happened when Inanna descended into the underworld. The world above lost its ability to be fertile. Animals and humans would not reproduce, and the land became barren. If the world descended into chaos, so too would the heavens. Mesopotamian religions created a hierarchy and structure of the heavens and earth in which the two must coexist. So we have key figures: Inanna, who is the goddess of fertility and war, and she is also the queen of heaven. Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld and Inanna's sister. Gilgamesh, a demigod. Anu, the sky god and father of Inanna. Gugalana, the bull of heaven, first husband of Ereshkigal. Ninshubur, Inanna's attendant. Enlil, lord of the gods. Nana, god of the moon. Enki, god of water. Dumuzid, Inanna's husband, a shepherd god, a god of fertility, later became the Babylonian god Tammuz. And Geshti Nana, Dumuzid's sister, who takes his place. Right, so it's an adventure right away. But let us continue. When Inanna reached Ereshkigal's throne, she sat on it in her sister's place. The Anuna, the 7 judges of the underworld, appeared and gave the goddess a look of death, shouted at her, and proclaimed her guilty of arrogance. Inanna was transformed into a rotting corpse and hang on a hook. The repeated use of the number 7 is intentional, as the number represented completion. The 7 divine powers, the 7 gates of the underworld, and the 7 underworld judges are thought to symbolize fundamental aspects of nature as ordained by the gods and possibly related to life, death, and the rule of divine law. A soul for a soul. In the Sumerian version of the narrative, Inanna's loyal attendant Ninshubur went to the gods to ask for help freeing Inanna. Enlil, lord of the gods, and Nana, the moon god, did not want to help her. Only Enki, the wisest of the gods and the god of water, agreed to help. He created 2 figures called the Galatura and the Kurdara, who could slip like phantoms into the underworld. There they recited the ritual words that Enki taught them, refusing the gift of rivers of water and fields of grain in exchange for finding Inanna. They asked, "Give us the corpse hanging on the hook." Galatura scattered a life-giving plant over her body, and Kurdara sprinkled it with life-giving water, restoring Inanna to good health. Just as Inanna was leaving the underworld, the Anuna appeared again and declared, "If Inanna is to ascend from the underworld, let her provide a substitute for herself." The goddess would not be allowed to escape cost-free. The underworld demanded a soul for a soul. Returning to Earth, Inanna was accompanied by a band of demons, anxious to seize someone to take her place. Inanna met members of her family and faithful servants, including Ninshubur, and did not want to let any of them go. Instead, she told the demons to follow her to a great apple tree on a plain. Dumuzid's punishment. Under the apple tree sat Inanna's husband Dumuzid, a mortal king who had been deified and had become the god of fertility and shepherding. Dumuzid was clothed in a magnificent garment and seated magnificently on Inanna's throne. Furious that her husband had not mourned her, Inanna handed him over to the demons. Dumuzid prayed to the sun god, his brother-in-law Utu, to turn him into a snake, but in spite of this transformation, he was captured and taken to the underworld. Inanna, however, missed her husband and wept for him. His sister Geshtinanna agreed to take his place for half of the year so that Dumuzid could return to Inanna in spring and the land became fertile. When the crops had been gathered, Dumuzid returned to spend the barren winter in the underworld, thus giving the world its seasons, humanity and mortality. This story of Inanna not only explained the seasonal cycle, but also gave an insight into what it meant to be human and how life was ordered. On earth, humans were the children of the gods. When they died, they became the children of Ereshkigal. This determined how they lived their lives. They believed if it was good to be clothed, to have good food, and to be surrounded by loved ones. Anywho, so there we go. I think this is the first chapter. Yes. So I spoke about this story, maybe not in that much detail, in one of my videos. It's the video where I roleplay as Nyx, the goddess of night and darkness, the primordial goddess of night and darkness from Greece. And I speak about Inanna and Ishtar and about this story. It's a cute video. If you'd like to watch it, I recommend it. In any case, a great story, I think. I still don't know precisely why Inanna went into the underworld, but let's see if we can find out in the further chapters. The second chapter that we have here is called Command and Bring About Annihilation and Recreation, Marduk and Tiamat. This story is very much dear to me, so let's dive right into it. The Enuma Elish, when on high, is a collection of 7 tablets recovered in 1849 from King Ashur-banipal II's library in Nineveh, Iraq. The tablets shed light on Babylonian beliefs about creation. Their purpose, however, in charting the rise of Marduk as the chief of God of Babylon was also to reinforce the power of the city's king as the god's representative on earth. The title Enuma Elish comes from the opening line, which acted as a declaration of spatial location, expressing the belief that the gods were above everything that would exist. There are also frequent reminders that of all the things in heavens and earth, none bore a name. To the Babylonians, nothing in the world could exist unless the gods has named it. Family of gods. According to Enuma Elish, in the beginning there was nothing except sweet water and salt water. The sweet water was the god Apsu, and the salt water was the goddess Tiamat. When the two waters mixed together, they gave birth to the first generation of gods. Disturbed by the noisy chatter of the new gods, Apsu decided to kill what he and Tiamat had created. When the most intelligent god, Ea, discovered his father's plot, he preempted it by killing Apsu and built a water temple out of his body. When Tiamat discovered that Apsu had been killed, she made terrible monsters and demons rise up and vowed to destroy every one of the gods. She created a warrior named Kingu, made him her husband, and gave him the Tablet of Destinies that held the fate of all living things. Fearing their mother's power, the gods needed someone to defeat Tiamat. Ea and his wife Damkina had a son, Marduk, who was filled with greater strength and wisdom than either of his parents. He was also said to have a divine radiance called Melamu in Akkadian, the language of Babylon. A new leader. Marduk convinced the other gods that he could defeat Tiamat if they gave him their power and made him their king. After much debate, they agreed. Marduk attacked Tiamat, capturing her in his net and killing her. Marduk then ripped her body in two and made the heavens from one half and the earth from the other. Marduk used her eyes to form the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, hence the Greek name Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers. After defeating Tiamat, Marduk attacked and destroyed her husband Kingu and made humankind from his blood. The gods were puzzled by this, but Marduk explained that humans would be useful servants. He then created Babylon to be the earthly home of the gods and their entrance to earth from the heavens. Babylon of Babilim in Akkadian means gateway of the gods. In contrast with its initial emphasis on the namelessness of everything, the myth ended by declaring Marduk king of all the gods and proclaiming all of his 50 names, many of which were related to gods whose powers he had taken. Its dominant theme of Marduk's supremacy may mean that the work dates from 17th century BCE, when Babylon was the great capital of Mesopotamia, or later when the city was being rebuilt and seeking to re-establish its status. As a text, the Enuma Elish illustrates how the Babylonians viewed creation as a triumph of the gods over chaos. So, there we have it. So we have key figures: Apsu, who was father of the gods; Tiamat, mother of the gods and goddess of the sea; Kingu, Tiamat's warrior husband; Ea, husband of Damkina and father of Marduk; Marduk, king of the gods in Babylonian religion, son of Ea and Damkina. When we started reading this chapter, I said that this story was very close and dear to me. And there's a reason for it. I'm not going to go into much detail, but Enuma Elish was one of the first one of the first mythology scripts that I read in full seriousness. And what do I mean by that? When I was little, when I was a child, I used to read mythologies as well. I can't remember reading too much about Babylonian or Mesopotamian at the time, but I do remember reading a few things, at least about Gilgamesh and, you know, all his deeds and all of that. But it was as a source of entertainment. And I think I was about, I don't know, maybe 19. I think I was in my first year of university when I read Enuma Elish. And when I say that I read it in a serious demeanor and not for entertainment purposes, I read a lot of these scripts at the time, including the Bible, with the attempt to find something. What that something was, I can't really tell you. But I started to read all these texts to find all the correlations between them and try to read between the lines. And the story about Tiamat is dear to me because while she is called being chaotic and again vengeful, I don't really see it like that, because she and her husband created the gods, right? And then these gods decided that they were better than at least their father was. And so they decided to kill him. And this was a first as well, because while in Greek mythology we also have the Titans that parent children, and then these children kill the father, but in those mythologies we see it from the perspective of the spouse, the wife or the goddess mother is grateful for you know, the Titan or the tyrant husband being removed. But in this case, she, I mean, there wasn't really anything against the father god, Apsu, and yeah, so I really don't see why he was killed, unless it's, you know, plain jealousy. And again, since she decided to avenge his death with such a you know, big and powerful strength, again, there's something there. And at the end of that story, I really hoped that yeah, that Tiamat really wasn't dead. And I still hope that she isn't. Anyway, but let us continue. Who can rival his kingly standing? The Epic of Gilgamesh. And there he is. So key figures we have King of Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, close friend of Gilgamesh, Shamash, god of the sun and of justice, Ishtar, goddess of fertility and war, Upnapishtim, an immensely wise, immortal man. The story of Gilgamesh follows the eponymous hero as he wrestles with the inevitability of death, discovers true friendship, and comes to understand the responsibilities of kingship. The long poem known as the Epic of Gilgamesh is among the world's earliest known works of great literature, and weaves together a series of tales thought to have been inspired by a king who ruled the Sumerian city of Uruk between 2800 and 2500 BCE. Taming the Tyrant. King Gilgamesh loved to walk the walls of Uruk, measuring the size of his kingdom. It was said that a king who knew the extent of his walls was noble and good. In reality, however, Gilgamesh was abusive towards his subjects and was a sexual predator who knew no bounds. When the people appealed to their gods for help in restraining their gods, their king Anu, the sky god and supreme ruler of heaven, decided Gilgamesh needed a companion who could tame his wild nature. Anu handed the task to Arura, the goddess of creation, who made Enkidu. At first, Enkidu was a savage man who ran with the animals, ate grass, and lived apart. In ancient Mesopotamia, if you lived outside the city walls or as a nomad, you were considered not only uncouth but dangerous. Until Enkidu was introduced into civilized society, he could not fulfill his role of taming and aiding Gilgamesh. When Enkidu upset the traps of a local hunter, the man went to the king and urged him to provide Enkidu with a prostitute who would be able to subdue his wild temperament. Excuse me, what kind of medication is that? Anyway, Gilgamesh sent a temple prostitute called Samhat to have sex with Enkidu for 7 days. After this, when Enkidu tried to run with the animals, they ignored him. Enkidu realized that something had changed. Through his sexual awakening, he had started to become civilized. Samhat then took Enkidu to the city of Uruk, where she clothed him, fed him bread, and gave him beer to drink. Treated like a man for a very first time, Enkidu's transformation from animal to human was complete. Okay, so moral of the story: until you have your sexual awakening, you are an animal. It's not me saying. Anyway, meanwhile, Gilgamesh had dreamed of a being whom he would love more than a woman, someone as strong as himself. I feel like this story is like the first registered story about homosexuality. Okay, strong as himself. Gilgamesh's mother, Ninsun, a minor goddess and a priestess in the temple, interpreted the dream and told him he would meet a man who would be an equal to him and a companion in his adventures. Gilgamesh and Enkidu eventually met when Enkidu blocked Gilgamesh from entering the quarters of a new bride. The two men wrestled, and although Gilgamesh beat Enkidu, the king acknowledged Enkidu as an equal and as a brother. I wonder what kind of wrestling that was. Let's keep it PG-13. Hunting Humbaba. Gilgamesh had long wanted to go on a quest to prove his strength. He set his sights on vanquishing Humbaba, the divinely appointed demon protector of the cedar forests, and stealing the tallest trees to take back as valuable timber to Uruk. Both man and beast, Humbaba was a formidable opponent. His strength was immense, and he could breathe fire. Gilgamesh armed himself to the teeth and sought blessing from the temple priests. Alarmed, the city elders warned Gilgamesh that he was overestimating his abilities. For the king even to reach the forest, let alone fight Humbaba, he had to take Enkidu with him. Heeding the advice, Gilgamesh enlisted Enkidu's help, and the pair left for the forest. They were protected by Shamash, the god of the sun and justice, invoked by Gilgamesh's mother. On reaching the forest, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were taunted by Humbaba, but before the demon could harm the pair, Shamash blew winds to trap Humbaba, and Gilgamesh and Enkidu gained the upper hand. Although Humbaba begged for his life, Gilgamesh killed him, cut down the cedars, made a raft, and sailed home to Uruk. So we have here the comparison of real and myth of King Gilgamesh. In myth, he was worshipped as a judge in the underworld, sometimes linked to Dumuzid, the shepherd. In Sumerian sources, the brother of Ishtar, or Inanna. In history, though, traditionally regarded as the fifth king of Uruk, named as in the Sumerian king list, supposed tomb discovered by archaeologists in 2003. So this is the Epic of Gilgamesh. I don't know if the book that I read at the time, again, was a little bit more PG-13, but it absolutely not includes the whole savage thing and what that was related to. I guess because it was a book, for studies in school, and therefore for people underage, it did not mention those details. But there we go. Ishtar's fury. Back in Uruk, Gilgamesh washed off the filth of battle and put on fresh robes. The Akkadian goddess Ishtar was watching and asked Gilgamesh to be her new husband. If he agreed, she said, he would gain riches beyond his dreams. Gilgamesh refused, referencing the fate of her previous husband, Dumuzid, whom she had sent to hell. Angered by his insult, Ishtar went to her father, Anu, the god of the sky. She pleaded with him to give her the bull of heaven so that she could send it to punish the people of Uruk for Gilgamesh's decision. Anu eventually relented, but warned his daughter that the beast would bring 7 years of famine to Uruk. When the bull of heaven reached the city, the earth was torn open. The hundreds of people fell to their death through the cracks. The third time that the bull attacked the city, Gilgamesh and Enkidu butchered the animal. After sacrificing its heart to Shamash, the two of them contemptuously threw a piece of the animal's hind leg at Ishtar, heedless of the disrespect this showed to the gods. That night, Enkidu had a dream in which Anu, Shamash, and Enlil, the god who granted kingship and had been Humbaba's master, discussed the deaths of Humbaba and the bull of heaven. In the dream, Anu and Enlil decided that either Enkidu or Gilgamesh should be killed. Shamash protested, saying that the pair had only gone to the cedar forest under his protection. Despite Shamash's best efforts, the gods decided that Enkidu must die. Death and the quest. Coming to grips with his own mortality, as foretold in the dream, Enkidu desperately prayed to Shamash and cursed Samhat, the temple prostitute. But why? For showing him the way to Uruk. Shamash rebuked him and told him to be glad of the adventures he had experienced. He assured Enkidu that Gilgamesh would give his body the finest resting place. Soon after, Enkidu fell ill and died 12 days later. Lamenting his friend's death, Gilgamesh enlisted all of the people and animals to mourn with him. Calling together the finest craftsmen in the land, Gilgamesh built a golden statue of Enkidu in his honor. He then abandoned civilization, put on animal skins, and wandered the wilderness in mourning. In doing so, Gilgamesh mirrored the early life of Enkidu. Enkidu had been a wild man who learned to become civilized. Upon Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh, once civilized, became wild. Gilgamesh then left Uruk on a quest for immortality, anxious not to die like his soulmate. When he followed the path that Shamash took through the sky at night, he found the tunnel of the heavens. By speaking to the guardians of the tunnels, he learned the story of Utnapishtim, a survivor of the Great Flood who, together with his wife, had achieved immortality and sat at the assembly of the gods. Determined to discover the secret of eternal life, Gilgamesh set out to fight Utnapishtim. Sounds like someone else. On his way to the underworld, Gilgamesh met an innkeeper called Siduri, who tried to convince him to turn back. She told the king that the journey was not safe for mere mortals, When he insisted on continuing, she reluctantly gave him directions to Ushanabi, who ferried people across the river of the dead. Gilgamesh found Ushanabi, and who agreed to help him on his mission. As they crossed the river, Ushanabi asked Gilgamesh why he had made a journey to the underworld. Gilgamesh told him how his grief at the death of Enkidu had driven him to find immortality. His words convinced Ushanabi to take him to Utnapishtim. When Gilgamesh eventually reached Utnapishtim, the man who had achieved immortality remarked on how worn out the king looked. Gilgamesh explained his pain at watching his friend die and said that he was afraid of his own mortality. In response, Utnapishtim asked why Gilgamesh would go on a futile quest instead of enjoying what he had been given in life. Why, O Gilgamesh, did you prolong woe? Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh that humans could not be immortal. The gods, he said, decided the length of each human life and did not reveal the time of death, so there was no point of searching for a way to avoid it. The Immortal Man. Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh that he had earned immortality by saving humanity during the Great Flood. Such a thing could happen only once. Gilgamesh would never gain immortality that way. Seeking to prove his point to Gilgamesh, who still believed himself worthy of immortality, Utnapishtim challenged the king to stay awake for a total of 6 days and 7 nights, instructing his wife to bake a loaf of bread for every night that Gilgamesh slept, so that he could not deny his failure. Gilgamesh accepted the challenge, but immediately fell asleep. Seriously. When he finally woke up, Utnapishtim rebuked the king for his arrogance, noting that while he wanted to overcome death, he was not even able to overcome his desire for sleep. So that no one could find him again, Utnapishtim banished the ferryman Ushanabi and sent Gilgamesh away. A parting gift. Before Gilgamesh and Ushanabi left, Utnapishtim's wife, who was also immortal, convinced her husband to give Gilgamesh a present. He told the king that if he wanted youth, a flower at the bottom of the lake could provide it. Hungry for this gift, Gilgamesh tied a stone weight to his feet, dived into the lake, and retrieved the plant. Cutting the weights free, he resurfaced, found Ushanabi, and told him that he would test the plan on the oldest person in Uruk before using it on himself. On his way home, however, Gilgamesh stopped to bathe in a spring. Just at that moment, a snake stole the flower from his grasp, shed its skin, and was young again. Heartbroken, Gilgamesh realized that youth, like immortality, had escaped him. Now he was fated to age and die. The king's story ended as it has begun, with Gilgamesh walking the walls of the city, surveying his domain. Although Gilgamesh could not become immortal, he had become a good king, who could describe not just the limits of his city, but the limits of human endeavor. His acceptance of mortality and of his own humanity left a lasting impression on the people of Uruk, rock who pressed his story down through the generations. So there we have it, the tale of Gilgamesh. Many things here that remind me of many other characters in other mythologies. But the story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu is also mentioned in that video that I referred before of me role-playing as Nyx. Because even though at the time I did not know in detail that their relationship was of a romantic nature, I kind of suspected it. And I just found the devotion, because he calls him soulmate, and again, just the devotion and how much he mourned the death of Enkidu. By the way, that video is for Valentine's Day, so it is related, love adjacent, and anyway, but yes, I think that he learned a lesson. I find it very much curious that there's a person here who became immortal and mentions the flood. So that's the last thing that we are going to read. Great Flood Myths. The tale of how Utnapishtim and his wife survived the Great Flood is similar to other flood myths of the ancient Near East, such as Sumerian flood myth of Ziusudra, the biblical tale of Noah, and the myth of Deucalion and Pyrrha in Greek mythology. Each of these revolves around a figure who rides out the flood in a large boat. The story told in the Epic of Gilgamesh is remarkably similar to the biblical story of Noah and the Ark. Utnapishtim tells how he had once been the king of a beautiful city called Shuruppak, and Lil argued for the destruction of humankind, and while his motives are unclear, the gods consented to his plan. But Ea, the god of wisdom and water, enabled Utnapishtim and his wife to survive. Ea told Utnapishtim to fashion a boat, take aboard the seeds of all living things, and eventually repopulate the earth. When the boat was finished, Utnapishtim took the animals, food, and beer on board, of course, because beer cannot be missing. The flood raged for 7 days and 7 nights. And when the rain stopped, the boat drifted to a half-atop Mount Nimush, known today as Pir Omar Gudrun in Iraqi Kurdistan. There, Utnapishtim released a swallow, then a dove, and finally a raven to find dry ground. When none of the birds returned, Utnapishtim knew it was safe to leave the boat. He made a sacrifice to the gods, and to thank him for his deed, just like the story of Noah, they created a rainbow. So there we go. The story is very much identical, and it is pretty much maybe more than 2,000 years earlier than Noah's. Anyway, but that's all I'm going to read from the book. There are a few things that I wanted to mention, of course. because I've been kind of holding myself through this video and I am actually surprised. What I wanted to mention is why Sumerian mythology is one of my favorites. While still being quite dramatic, is not as dramatic as Greek, for instance, or Egyptian as well, which I am going to get to. I actually recently just got a book about the Book of Death, the Book of Dead from Egyptian rituals and stuff like that. So I will be diving into Egyptian mythology soon as well. But either way, so this grouped mythology of Babylonian, Sumerian, and just in general of the region in Mesopotamia, I like it very much. There is another section of mythology that I did not read, but I do believe it is further in this section of the book, which speaks about Anunnaki. And a few of them were actually mentioned here today. If you don't know who those are, maybe it's good that you don't. From my side, I am very much, again, suspecting that most of further religions and mythologies were based on Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology. Maybe not the ones that were happening at the same time. And that is the twist, right? Because of all these similarities, my question is it the same story being retold by progressive change of authorities and deities that were being worshipped locally and globally? Or is the story the same because everyone knew that that story was the story that was an actual history and not just mythology? So that's why I really want to dig into the details. You don't have to tell me twice that let's call it Christian mythology is based on its antecessors, so the ones that came before it. I am absolutely certain. I also think that the dominance of Marduk as the king of God, and when he takes power from all the other gods, is a way to translate into just one God, into monotheism. Anyway, I am threading the line of danger here. Nothing against Christian mythology, let's call it like that, because I already called it like that. Except that I do have a few things against it. But anyway, I'm not gonna go into that today. I think that this chapter was definitely one of my favorites, even though perhaps I did not discover too many new things. I still thought that sharing it with you would be really, really good and helpful, of course, for our journey in this mythology saga. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time and listening to me today. I hope that you enjoy this session. If you would like to suggest a mythology that you would like to hear me reading about, please do so in the comments. Anywho, thank you again for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.